Diplomats sit in negotiation rooms drafting ceasefire proposals, while out on the water, active military missiles continue to strike targets across the Middle East. The financial damage from these exchanges is hitting immediate neighbors right now. In Pakistan, the uncertainty surrounding oil transit has driven petrol prices up to 380 rupees per liter. Military violence is spilling over borders. Kuwait reported intercepting multiple inbound drones and hostile missiles, taking collateral damage from a fight it didn't start. For a UPSC aspirant preparing for General Studies Paper 2, this raises a specific, testable question. We must examine how a localized exchange of fire in a waterway, exactly 39 kilometers wide, spikes retail inflation in India within a matter of weeks. The macroeconomic stability of oil-dependent nations remains entirely tethered to the physical security of a single maritime choke point. U.S. President Donald Trump publicly stated that Iran is actively seeking an agreement with Washington. He heavily criticized domestic politicians who are pushing him to escalate military action, asking them to remain patient and allow negotiations to proceed. That optimism clashes with the timeline of recent events. A formal ceasefire took effect on April 8th, but subsequent mediation talks hosted in Islamabad collapsed without producing a lasting agreement. The violence resumed shortly after, when Iranian forces shot down a U.S. MQ-1 drone operating over international waters. The United States Central Command retaliated. U.S. fighter aircraft eliminated Iranian air defenses, taking out radar and command control sites at Gorik and Keshman Island. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps then claimed their own retaliatory strike, stating they had targeted a U.S. airbase in the region. Modern statecraft frequently relies on this dual-track strategy. Nations deploy lethal military force to establish leverage on the ground, while simultaneously exchanging proposals through back-channel diplomacy. Looking at this satellite map, we pinpoint the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow bottleneck connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. Geopolitically, the shores are strictly divided. Iran controls the northern coast. The southern coast is shared by the UAE and Oman's Masandam Peninsula. The economic stakes are immense. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply must physically sail through this 39-kilometer gap to reach global markets. This diagram illustrates the shipping route. Once vessels clear the strait, that crude oil travels straight across the Arabian Sea, terminating at major Indian western ports like Mumbai and Kandla. Because geography forces this massive volume of trade through a single narrow channel, a military skirmish between U.S. and Iranian forces instantly restricts supply, triggering an energy security crisis for India. To understand the legality of these blockades, we rely on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, known as UNCLOS, which governs international waters and maritime disputes. UNCLOS guarantees a specific legal right called transit passage. This ensures that vessels, including foreign military ships, have the freedom to navigate through international straits. Initiating a military blockade here violates that international law. India's domestic legal framework dictates how the government responds to these violations. Under the Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 51 of the Indian Constitution instructs the state to endeavor to promote international peace and security. Furthermore, Schedule 7 of the Constitution clarifies jurisdiction. Under the Union List, entries 10 and 14 establish that foreign affairs and international treaties are exclusively managed by the central government, not individual states. This connects international maritime law directly to India's constitutional mandates. It forms the exact legal reasoning behind India maintaining strict diplomatic neutrality, even as its critical energy supply chains are threatened by foreign conflicts. The modern standoff driving these supply threats originates with the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which severed diplomatic ties between Washington and Tehran. Decades later, the diplomatic high-water mark achieved with the JCPOA, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, eventually collapsed. This resulted in the current reality of heavy economic sanctions and naval brinkmanship. This history exposes India's extreme systemic vulnerability. India imports over 80% of its crude oil requirements, and that supply is heavily skewed toward producers located inside the Persian Gulf. This animated map shows India's infrastructural solution to this threat, the ISPRL, or Indian Strategic Petroleum Reserves Limited. These underground facilities in Mangalore, Padur, and Vishakhapatnam act as an emergency buffer, storing millions of metric tons of crude oil to mitigate sudden Hormuz blockades. This physical map highlights the specific geography required for prelims. You can recall the countries bordering the Persian Gulf using the mnemonic I-Suk-A-Kik: Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Iraq, and Kuwait, plus Oman located right at the strait. Decades of bilateral failures between the United States and Iran have created a permanent risk to global shipping. India has been forced to spend billions of dollars on domestic underground petroleum reserves just to protect its economy from the fallout. Let's translate this strategic mapping into your exam preparation. This geopolitical friction maps directly onto General Studies Paper 2 for International Relations and GS Paper 3 for Energy Security. You are likely to encounter a 150-word mains question similar to this. Evaluate the strategic significance of the Strait of Hormuz on India's macroeconomic stability. An ideal response requires a three-part structure. First, detail the exact geography of the choke point. Second, define the mechanics of imported inflation caused by freight delays. Finally, argue for the necessity of energy diversification through strategic reserves like the ISPRL. For a rapid prelims check, verify right now if you can define the exact parameters of UN Clause transit passage and accurately identify the nations sharing the Hormuz coast from memory. When you correctly map a single geopolitical event across its historical context, physical geography, and constitutional law framework, you generate the multidimensional analysis required for elite mains answers. This vector map expands the scope, illustrating how the Strait of Hormuz blockade runs parallel to the simultaneous maritime crisis occurring in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait involving Houthi forces. Political leaders may urge patience as diplomatic negotiations inch forward in Islamabad, but these maritime blockades inflict immediate, tangible economic damage on emerging economies heavily reliant on imported oil. Drop a comment below with your most valuable takeaway from this 7-step breakdown. Make sure you're subscribed, because our next breakdown will decode the specific maritime security frameworks operating in the Red Sea. In a tightly integrated global supply chain, an isolated missile strike 1,000 miles away immediately threatens domestic economic survival.